when you look at a wildfire, or as it's called globally, or what you call bushfire, it's not such that bushfire is getting worse and worse around the world. Actually, we know very well that most of history, that is since 1870, we've seen declining levels of fire activity around the world. Why is that? It's because we have more agriculture, we have better fire practices, and fundamentally we stopped using fire, right? Remember don't remember 100 years ago, but 100 years ago, we had, a home was pretty much defined by the place where we had the fire. We had fire in our kitchens, we had fire in our living rooms, because that was how we kept warm. We have taken away fire from our everyday lives, put it into power stations or into our cars, but in little sparks. We've taken it away, and that's why there's a lot less fire in the landscape. So actually what we see is a declining level, not an increasing level, of wildfire around the world. We certainly know this over the instrumental record. Over the satellite record, we have lots of studies. This is just one from NASA that shows that the amount of area burnt in the world has declined dramatically, not increased, over the satellite area. But certainly when we talk about wildfire in Australia, it has been one hell of a bushfire season. So clearly there's been the sense, surely this must be tremendously different. And I was actually quite surprised that nobody seems to have done the numbers. So I tried to look at what do we know about bushfire in Australia. Well, we do actually have good data for Australia back from 1900. So as you can see, all the references are out here. But I'm just going to show you the data. So again, if we look at the historical data, about 11% or so of Australia burnt every year from 1900 to 1950. Since then, it's declined significantly. So by the late 1990s, it was down below 8%. And what has happened since then, we know very well because we have good satellite data, and that's why these are decadal estimates. Now they get a lot more jumpy because obviously every year is going to be different. This is the satellite record over Australia. Again, nobody disputes this. So basically we've gone from about 8% in the satellite era just before the millennium down to today, it's less than 6%. So we've seen a declining level certainly over the last 120 years. Not something that most people hear. But you would imagine this season was very different, right? If you were to put it somewhere, I bet that most people would say this season must be up here again or something, right? No. There has been a lot of fire in New South Wales. There's been a lot of fire in Victoria. That's important because that's where a lot of the value of Australia is. So clearly, this has been very damaging. It's also, incidentally, where a lot of cameras are. So a lot of people have had a chance to see this. But the global warming argument is that if temperatures rise, we're going to see more fire. And I'll show you that in just a second. That is true. But it assumes that pretty much all areas, except for tropical savanna, will increase in burn area. But that's not what we've seen. If we take the amount of burnt area, and I'm using The Guardian, so they have used an estimate for all of Australia, they don't have the estimate of prescribed burns, so I've increased the Guardian's number with the amount of prescribed burns that are typically taking place. And then also, of course, the season is not done, but we do know from satellite measures how much of this part of the season that has already happened is a part of the total season. So I've increased that number again. This is what we would likely see the full season being, right? It's a little less than 4%. Again, this does not mean that the current bushfires were not terrible. They were terrible. It was a tragedy in so many ways. But this is not alarming in the sense that, oh my God, this is global warming. This is simply an indication of, yes, it was terrible where they happened, and we should try and make a good argument of how we get rid of bushfires, especially where people live. One way of doing that, of course, is prescribed burns and many other things. Another way is to say people probably shouldn't be living out where there's a lot of bushfire. So again, there are many ways you can do that, but you need to recognize that this season has not in any way been exceptional. Imagine if you guys had actually cut down all your fossil fuel emissions. Not a car anywhere, not a power plant anywhere, not very much food. A lot of what we're doing here today would be impossible. But imagine if you'd actually done it. If you'd done this that no other country on Earth has managed to do. Imagine you'd done it already in 2012 when the first carbon tax was proposed. Imagine you were the country that had led the world, cut all carbon emissions in 2012. You'd cut it also in 2013, 2014, up to 2020, 2021, 2022, all the way to 2100. There's a lot of years, lots of effort. It would have a huge cost, but you'd really have done something for the climate. What would have been the impact on the area burned? I actually tried to do this, but I can't because you can't see it. I can't make the graph. I can't make this thin enough so you could actually see it. But let me just tell you, right now, we expect that we'll get 6% by the end of the century. If Australia had gone carbon neutral in 2012, and every year since, the biggest achievement of any nation ever, anywhere, instead of 6%, you would have reached by 2100 5.997%. Congratulations! You have just spent an enormous amount of resources to achieve absolutely nothing.